Have you ever been so certain of victory? You could already taste it, only to feel the ground vanish beneath your feet. At Esther's banquet, the music roared, the food turned bitter, and dread gnawed at his soul. The king's question still thundered in his mind. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? He had dreamed of glory, yet was forced to lavish it all on Mordecai the Jew. Now, as the king smiled at his queen, he felt the ice cracking beneath him, each moment bringing him closer to ruin. To understand the height of the fall, you must first see the tower he built, stone by bitter stone. Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. This was more than a name. It was a bloodline of ancient enmity, a legacy of hatred that flowed in his veins like a dark river. He was a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites, the tribe that became Israel's first and most hated enemy after they attacked the Israelites from behind when they were weak and weary, fleeing Egypt. He could still hear his father's stories, whispered by firelight, of King Saul's failure to utterly destroy his ancestors, and the prophet Samuel's blade finishing what royalty could not. They were stories of survival, of a lineage that refused to be erased, and of a vow of vengeance passed down through generations. He had carried that history with him, a constant, humming need to prove that the Agagites were not defeated. They were merely waiting for their time to rise again. And he had climbed, oh, how he had climbed in the Persian court. He'd mastered not just politics, but the state religion, Zoroastrianism. This was a faith of dualities, of the eternal struggle between the god of light, Ahura Mazda, and the god of darkness, Angra Mainyu. In this worldview, his rise was evidence of divine favor. His pride wasn't just personal, it was, in his mind, divine. He was on the side of order and light, and these Jews, with their singular, invisible god, represented a chaotic, disruptive force. He'd memorized the complex dance of Persian politics, the unspoken rules of power and patronage. He learned to wear a mask of unwavering loyalty and shrewd counsel, becoming the most powerful noble in the empire, the right hand of King Xerxes himself. His signature, scrawled with a flourish, was law. His nod could launch ships or condemn armies. The obeisance of the masses, the sea of bowed heads and prostrate bodies, was the oxygen that fed his divinely ordained ego. He wore his authority like a second skin. He had wealth that could fill storehouses, a wife, Zeresh, whose cunning mind matched his ambition, and 10 sons who would inherit his glory. He had everything a man could want. But everything is never enough when there is one man who refuses to acknowledge it. Mordecai the Jew. He was a scribe, a minor official, a remnant of a conquered people. Yet, day after day, he would not bow, he would not kneel. He remained as upright and unmovable as the cypress trees of the north. It was not a loud defiance, but a silent one, which made it all the more maddening. This was not only disrespect, it was a theological affront. In a culture where prostration, proskinesis, was the expected sign of respect, Mordecai's refusal was a declaration that his loyalty to his God outweighed all earthly power. It was a constant reminder that Haman's authority had limits, that one silent act of defiance was a crack in the marble foundation of his perfect world. And with every passing day, it spread wider, threatening to bring the whole magnificent tower crashing down. The insult was a poison, a slow-working venom that seeped into every corner of his life. It woke him in the night, a tightness in his chest. The sweetest wine at his lavish table tasted of bitterness when he thought of Mordecai's unwavering posture. The sycophantic praise of his friends and subordinates felt hollow, an empty chorus compared to that one man's silence. Mordecai's refusal was a silent shout that declared Haman's power an illusion, his status a fragile performance. It couldn't stand. It was an infection, and it required not a bandage, but a cauterizing flame. He would not merely remove the man, he would erase his entire people, their very memory from the empire. He called his mages and advisors. He would cast the pur, the sacred lots. This was no mere game of chance. It was a form of divination, a way to discern the will of the gods and find the most auspicious day for their destruction. He was invoking the spiritual forces of his world to sanction his genocidal plan. The small dice-like stones clattered across the ornate table, their tumble feeling like the turning of the universe itself. They landed on the 13th of Adar, nearly a year away. A flicker of impatience was quickly smothered by cold satisfaction. The gods had spoken. Time would allow his hatred to ferment into something truly potent. Time would allow him to savor it. He went to the king not with rage, but with calculated reason. "There is a certain people," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people. They do not keep the king's laws." He painted a picture of a silent threat, a fifth column within the borders. He did not even speak their name. He offered a solution, clean and final, and promised 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury to fund the effort. The king, disinterested in the details of ethnic squabbles and trusting his most valuable advisor, agreed. He pulled the signet ring from his own finger and gave it to Haman. "Keep your money," he said, "and do with the people as you see fit." The edict was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's own seal. It was sent by couriers on the fastest horses to every satrap, every governor, and every official of every province. It commanded that on a single day, the 13th of Adar, the people of Judah were to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated, young and old. He should have felt victorious. He should have felt satisfied. He stood on the balcony of his estate with his wife and sons, watching the couriers gallop out in all directions, and he felt nothing. The hollow feeling remained. The image of Mordecai, still unbent, still unbroken, still reporting for duty at the king's gate, festered. The victory felt incomplete, while that man still drew breath. Zeresh, his partner in ambition, saw his discontent. Her solution was as brutal as it was simple. "Let a gallows be made," she said, her voice cold and practical, 75 feet high. "And in the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet, Mary." The idea was a bomb. It was the final satisfying punctuation to his grand plan. He ordered the construction immediately, the rough-hewn timber a physical manifestation of his hate. Watched with his sons as his servants erected the monstrous structure in his courtyard, its shadow a long, dark finger stretching across his property. It was a family project of vengeance. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He went to the palace that morning, light-hearted, ready to ask for the life of the man who haunted him. The sun had never shone brighter. The throne room was bustling with the usual morning petitioners. Haman swept in, his mind already composing the elegant request for Mordecai's execution. But before a single word could leave his mouth, the king looked up. His expression was troubled. "Haman," the king said, "I have a question for you. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" The world narrowed. His heart gave a mighty, joyous leap. Who else could it be? The queen had invited him alone to a banquet with the king. Who was more favored? In his soaring arrogance, Haman designed his own nightmare. He painted a picture of supreme honor. "For the man the king delights to honor," he proclaimed, "let them bring a royal robe that the king has worn and a horse that the king has ridden. and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the city square, proclaiming before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" He stood there, basking in the king's approving gaze, already feeling the weight of the royal robe on his own shoulders. Then came the words that turned his blood to ice. "Go at once," said the king, his voice booming with genuine pleasure. "Take the robe and the horse as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned." The words were a physical blow to his stomach. The air left his lungs. The world tilted on its axis, the colors of the throne room bleeding into a nauseating swirl. This wasn't happening. It was a cruel joke, a nightmare from which he must awake. He, Haman, was to publicly honor the vermin he had vowed to destroy. He was to be the crier, the servant, leading the horse of the man whose death he had come to request. The walk to the city gate was a death march. He could feel the eyes of the courtiers on him, their confusion and hidden laughter, 1,000 tiny needles. He found Mordecai, sitting calmly. The Jew's face showed no surprise, no gloating. His expression was unreadable, which was infinitely worse. To Haman, it was the look of the God of Israel, silently judging him. Dressing Mordecai in the king's own robe was an act of profound self-degradation. Helping him onto the king's horse felt like placing his own head on the executioner's block. Each step through the city square was an eternity of exquisite humiliation. The cheers of the crowd, which he had once basked in, were now a vicious mockery. He had to shout the words, his voice cracking with the effort, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." He could feel Mordecai's silent gaze upon him, not from below, but from atop the king's horse, and it stripped him of every ounce of his pride, his authority, his very identity. The trap had been sprung with devastating precision, and he realized with a horror that chilled him to the bone that he had built every inch of it himself. He stumbled home, his head covered in shame, a broken man. Zeresh and his wise men could offer no comfort, only a terrifying prophecy that acknowledged a power greater than their own. If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Their words were still hanging in the air when the king's eunuchs arrived, rushing him to the second banquet. The second banquet was awake, and he was the corpse. He knew it. The food was a feast of dread. Esther's beauty was a terrifying mask. When the king asked her for her petition, the air grew still and heavy. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king," she said, her voice clear and steady, "and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my petition. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." The king's face darkened. Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do this? Esther's finger, steady and sure, pointed across the table, her eyes, full of a fire he had never seen, locked on his. The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. Terror, pure and absolute, seized him. The king's wrath was a tangible force, a storm that erupted from the throne. In a desperate, fatal misstep, Haman fell upon the queen's couch to beg for mercy, a move the king, returning in his fury, saw not as supplication, but as assault. "Will he even assault the queen in my own presence?" The words were his death sentence. The gallows, still standing tall and ominous in his courtyard, waited for him. The man who sought to hang Mordecai was hanged upon his own creation. The edict he wrote with such venomous pride was countered by one written by Mordecai himself, sealed with the ring once taken from Haman's own cold finger. His 10 sons shared his fate, executed to prevent any of his lineage from seeking vengeance, ending the house of Agag forever. His estate was given to the queen, and on the 13th of Adar, the day Haman had chosen for their destruction by casting the pur, The Jews instead celebrated their deliverance. They instituted a festival of feasting and joy called Purim, after the very lots he had cast to seal their doom. His name became synonymous with evil, a footnote in the story of the people he tried to erase. His legacy was not one of power, but of proverb, a warning against the pride that goes before a fall. He had sought to build a monument to his own glory and to his gods, but all he built was the instrument of his own ruin and a testament to the God of Israel. Haman's story is a powerful echo of a pattern we see throughout Scripture and in our own day-to-day lives. The proud are brought low, and the humble are exalted. His spectacular downfall offers several critical lessons for us today. Pride constructs its own gallows. Unchecked arrogance is blinding. Haman's need for total recognition led him to design the very parade of honor that became his ultimate humiliation. His ego was the architect of his ruin, proving the truth of Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Hatred is a poison you drink yourself. The bitterness Haman held was a cup he drank from daily, believing it would strengthen him. Instead, it clouded his judgment and led to his downfall. He became a living example of the truth that whoever digs a pit will fall into it. Proverbs 26:27. You cannot thwart God's plan. Haman used every tool at his disposal: superstition, political power, and wealth. Yet his story reminds us that God faithfully defends his people. Human schemes built on malice will always shatter against the unshakable rock of his purpose. Just as Joseph declared, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good," Genesis 50:20. The quest for control is vanity. Haman believed he was the master of his fate. He was blind to the quiet workings of God's hand, a queen's hidden identity, a king's sleepless night, that were orchestrating his downfall. This confirms the wisdom of Proverbs 16:9. In their hearts, people plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Legacy is forged by character, not title. Haman held the highest title in the empire, yet he is remembered only as a villain. Mordecai, who started at the gate, is remembered as a hero. This shows that our positions are temporary, but our character is eternal. For the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Silent integrity outlasts noisy power. Mordecai's quiet, consistent refusal to compromise his faith proved stronger than all of Haman's decrees. In the end, it was the unwavering principle of one man that toppled the empire's most powerful official. Righteousness holds a power that arrogance can never comprehend, for the meek will inherit the land. Psalm 37, verse 11. If this reminder of God's sovereignty in the face of pride resonated with you, please help us share this hope. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this encouragement, and subscribe for more biblical stories that bring God's Word to life. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.